Welcome back to all of you, where our session continues with a panel discussion. It's an absorbing discussion on the antiquity of Indian soft power. Srimati Vijayalakshmi Vijaykumar will welcome the panelists.
Before I welcome the panelists of the second session, I would like to thank everybody who has been with us in the first session, all the panelists. I would really like to thank Sri Dinesh Patnaikji, who originally said he may not be able to make it live. And he has stayed with us for the entire session. Thank you very much, sir. And I would like to thank all our young ambassadors who have been so kind to come and share their time with us. And I really look forward to these youngsters taking forward and allowing our flag to fly high on the global stage. And it's wonderful to see, such young children so dedicated in what they are doing. I hope that will go through their lives and take them to levels that even they didn't expect. And of course, I thank both our gurus, Swami Tejomayanji and Swami Avadeshananji, for taking the trouble to record these, because they felt that, they didn't want the internet to play foul and, not allow them to enjoy this evening. So they both took the trouble to record this for us and sent it to us. And I especially want to thank our whole team. I'm sure you will all understand my team has literally been working night and day to bring this together to you. And we have not had any timing. There'll be calls made early morning, late night, messages going through the day. We've been sitting on Zoom meetings the entire day. And I must say that hats off to this most committed, wonderful team. And of course, our technical team also, Sri Koti ji and Srinivasan who are always with us through all these webinars. And of course, a big thank to Hari Kiran, but he's on our team, so I don't think I really want to thank him, because all of these are a part of our team. But why I'm mentioning all this to you is our soft power team are all youngsters, and it's really good to see youngsters so dedicated and wanting to do something for our country. That's why I thought I should mention it. Otherwise, they're after all our team. And I think I would really now like to start with the second session. Since, our youngsters, I thought they would all speak for longer, and so we had given them enough time. But since they all chose to make their talks really cryptic and small. So now we will move on to the second section, and I would like to welcome Sri Michel Danino, who has been a very good friend for decades now. And he has been ever so kind to always share. The wonderful thing about him has been that I just need to make a call or send him a message and say, I'm trying to research this. And he'll say, wait, Vijayalakshmi, I will send it to you. And sooner or later, I will find my mailbox full with what I need, to sit and read for the next few months. But, he's so willing to share with us. And I welcome Dr. Chitra Madhavan. She's another person like this. And, I have all these vague questions sometimes that I ask them, and they're ever so willing to share. And when we told them we were going to be doing this, they were instantly happy to be a part of this. And Radhika Srinivasan is there with us. And she was also very kind. She said, I don't know how to handle Zoom. So we said, don't worry, we'll be there with you. And so she's there. And Dr. Lavanya, we have made her, wake up at odd hours to be with us. Of course, now it's, I think, a halfway decent hour. I welcome all of them. Now I will allow Supriya to introduce all of them to you. And I also want to welcome everybody who was not there in the first session. This is a presentation of the Center for Soft Power. At the Center for Soft Power, we are studying the soft power of our country. We bring a lot of interviews, commentaries, articles that are in our soft power mag. And like I said in the previous session, when we say soft power, it's not about flexing our muscles anywhere, though that's the accepted term. For me, I would say akarshanam, or gently, softly attracting people with the beauty that we have in our country. Because I believe that our culture and our country is simply beautiful. Whether it's the flora or the fauna or the art that we have, our mountains, our rivers, just everything about us is simply something that brings joy and beauty. I mean, I felt so good when this little child, Muskan, said that, when the flag flies high, that's when she feels elated. When we say flag flies high, it's not about this geography, but it's about this beautiful civilization that we have been a part of. So this is what we do at the Center for Soft Power. Over the next month, you will be brought, wonderful panelists like this. We have panel discussions, we have labs, we have workshops. We bring, we even have 2 sessions, one Nataka where we have a theater session for you all. We have one Bollywood dance also, because we don't want to only look at what is ancient, we are looking at what is contemporary also. But I think our culture is absolutely contemporary. There's nothing that is too old, and it's nothing to do with grandmother's tales. Our culture is something that has both the old and the new all navigating together. You will see a farmer that's tilling his soil with bullock cart, but he'll whip out his latest smartphone and he'll be talking on that, or he'll be navigating through that. So once again, welcome to you all, and I hope you will be with us through this whole month of celebration. Over to Supriya. And I thank Supriya for being so kind to have pitched in and given her time to us today.
Thank you for thanking me, Vijayalakshmi ji. It was absolutely my pleasure. So let me introduce, quickly run you through a small introduction of all the eminent panelists that we have today with us. Chairing the panel discussion on the antiquity of Indian soft power would be Professor Michel Danino, a Padma Shri awardee, a French-born Indian author and scholar of the Indian civilization. Currently a visiting professor at the IIT Gandhinagar, Gujarat, where he assists its Archaeological Sciences Center. He coordinates a course on Indian knowledge systems and teaches courses on aspects of Indian civilization. We also have Dr. Chitra Madhavan, a historian, who's a recipient of 2 postdoctoral fellowships from the Department of Culture, Government of India, and the Indian Council of Historical Research, New Delhi. She has co-edited a book, South Indian Heritage, which contains 500 articles on various aspects of South India's heritage. She has authored 7 books and also wrote a coffee table book, Snapshots of a Bygone Era, a Century of Images. With us today is also Srimati Radhika Srinivasan, who has authored 4 books on Asia's art and thought. Currently, she runs an institution called Kamalalayam in Manjakudi, Tiruvarur for underprivileged girls. Dr. Lavanya Vemsani, who is with us, is a professor of history from the United States of America, from the Shawnee State University. Her books include Modern Hinduism in Text and Context, Krishna in History, Thought and Culture, an encyclopedia of the Lord of Many Names, and Hindu and Jain mythology of Balarama, in addition to numerous articles. India, A New History, and The Feminine Journeys of the Mahabharata are her upcoming books that we can look forward to. She serves as the editor-in-chief of academic journal, including American Journal of Indic Sciences, associate editor of Canadian Journal of History, and the editorial board of Air Force Journal of Indo-Pacific Affairs. We're so happy to have you with us, and we look forward to this discussion. Professor Michel Danino, the panel is yours.
All right, Vijayalakshmi ji.
Yes, yes.
So first, my greetings to you, and it's a long time since we met somehow, and now we are meeting in disembodied fashions these days, but perhaps it is better than nothing. My gratitude to you for having me here. It's a privilege to inaugurate this, or not exactly inaugurate, but launch the first session of this event, Namaste 2020. And I'm always extremely appreciative and admirative of all the work you have done for Indian culture and heritage. You've been producing beautiful event after beautiful event, and it's a remarkable achievement. So my gratitude for having me today. And I think we have a session with very high accomplished scholars. I happen to know Dr. Chitra Madhavan quite well for a number of years, and I'm happy to see her. And I know already that there will not be much that I will have to comment on what she will say on India's interface with Southeast Asia. I have not met Radhika ji, and Namaste. Manjakuri rings a bell somehow, but I have not come across your path so far, and I'm glad to be with you in this session. And Professor Lavanya ji, and again, I've heard your name and I have heard some of the titles of your books. Now I'm going to have to dig them up and acquire them for our library here at IIT Gandhinagar, and I look forward to reading some of them. So this session, I think, is something that in Vijayalakshmi ji's conception had to deal with antiquity of Indian influences. And I will be very brief. There is so much more than our speakers are going to say. I simply want to set down the tone, perhaps, by reminding everyone that civilizations do not exist in isolation. It is almost impossible, except perhaps if you have some remote island civilization, for a civilization not to interact closely with its neighbors. And all the history, and sometimes, of course, prehistory or proto-history rather, that we have tells us of intense interactions, and the more the evidence accumulates and the more intense and complex the modes of interaction turn out to be. India gives us a shining example of interactions with all of its neighbors, and sometimes distant neighbors, all the way to China, Japan, all the way to Greece and the Mediterranean world. And this is a very rich phenomenon which Europeans try to grapple with right from the 18th century. Perhaps the first who noticed it and wrote something about it, even though he had almost zero data, was Voltaire. And Voltaire wrote in French a long essay on India, very misinformed, very generous, very intuitively semi-correct. But he said that India is the land that needs no one, but which the whole world needs. And I thought this was quite a remarkable intuition, because it is reflected in the early interactions that India has with other civilizations. And I will simply highlight, up to the proto-historical period, let us say, when we see right from the beginning at Mehergarh, about 6,000 BC, that's about 8,000 years ago, possibly even 9,000 years ago. And Mehergarh is a site in Balochistan which will create a succession of Neolithic and later on proto-historical cultures that have a continuity with the later Indus or Harappan civilization. We are actually 4,000 years before that Harappan civilization. And this huge site of Mehergarh, something like 200 hectares, perched at the foothills of Balochistan, about 500 kilometers away from the sea, from the coast, shows already artifacts of seashells shaped into necklaces, 500 kilometers away from the sea, from where the shells were located. And not only that, even lapis lazuli. Lapis lazuli, as you know, is a beautiful semi-precious stone of a deep kind of almost electric blue. And Mehergarh comes up 8,000 years ago with some lapis lazuli artifacts. And the remarkable thing is that there is no lapis lazuli at all in Balochistan or in the Indus plains below. Lapis lazuli comes from across the Hindu Kush, region called Badakhshan, and in which much later the Harappans will actually set up an outpost, which was called Shotugai. And this must have been a very long, arduous journey just to get hold of some semi-precious stones that made cultural sense to them. So we find therefore, and this is a deep Neolithic, we find therefore from this deep Neolithic era already a desire to move, to exchange, to contact others for reasons which may appear superficial, because it's about luxury trade after all. It's about trinkets, it's about things which are superfluous. So this is actually the proper definition of a luxury item. And of course, luxury items will form a very important part of trade and exchange with civilizations. So this goes on, I'm jumping 4,000 years, and the Harappans establish a very close-knit network of trading, not only with this Central Asian region, northern Afghanistan onward, all the way to almost the Caspian Sea. Harappan seals were found close to the Caspian Sea, but also westward towards the Persian Gulf, towards Iran, towards all the way to Mesopotamia, where a lot of Harappan seals, pottery items, semi-precious ornaments were found. And there's plenty of evidence, I don't have to spend time on this, on the intensity of the trade with the Harappans. But there is a mystery there. And the mystery is that archaeology has brought to light whatever the Harappans were exporting to those regions. So typically, the semi-precious stones, as I said, pottery items, the Mesopotamian tablets speak of spices, of exotic animals like peacocks, some types of monkeys, and so on and so forth. So we kind of know, and there's a small list that Sargon the Great in 2350 BC records in a tablet of items that he gets imported and takes pride in that import. He said, I get the ships from Meluha. So Meluha is the name that they give to this eastern region, which today we call Harappan civilization. I get those ships from Meluha, come and dock at my harbor. And he takes pride in this, and we kind of know what all is exported by the Harappans. And more evidence has come from Oman. A lot of royal graves have yielded also Harappan goods and ornaments and seals and a lot of pottery and so on. The mystery is, what did the Harappan bring back home? Because they had to bring something back home. Trade is always both ways. And there are partial answers, possibly ingots of copper from Oman, which was called Dilmun. It was a separate small civilization called Dilmun in those days. And perhaps some silver, perhaps some exotic goods like various food items, but very, very little has remained in the Harappan archaeological assemblage. And therefore, it looks as if the balance of trade was much in the Harappans' favor. I mention this because, and this will be almost my concluding point, if we jump another 2,000 years, so we started 6,000 BC, then 2,500 BC or so, and now we jump to 500 BC, and we find the beginnings of the trade with the Mediterranean region. First of all, through the Persian Empire, and then basically with the Greek and later Roman world. I'm of course skipping all the historical complexities, they don't matter here. And we find again that Indians export all kinds of things. So typically spices, textile, teak wood, timber for the Roman navy, because teak wood behaves very well in the sea, in saline water. whereas European timber does not. And various other luxury goods, food items, and so on. And perhaps most of all textiles and semi-precious stones. And then there's a lot of documentation, archaeological evidence, of course. We find Indian figurines of apsaras in Pompeii, for example, things like that. So there's plenty of evidence, and we have, of course, the Roman literature, which documents this in minute detail. And we have Pliny the Elder. Pliny was a historian who complains, and I'm going to just read, that's all I want to do. I'm going to just read his quotation, which I have here, yes. 77 of the Common Era, but he refers to past centuries also. And he says, by the lowest reckoning, India, China, and the Arab Peninsula draw from our empire 100 million sesterces, that's the Roman currency, every year. That is the sum which our luxuries and our women cost us. Well, women, perhaps because of the textile, but we know that Pliny the Elder was a little bit misogynist. So anyway, let's not worry about this. And he continues, in no year does India absorb less than 50 million sesterces of our empire's wealth, sending back merchandise to be sold with us at 100 times its prime cost. What he complains about basically is that there's a huge deficit of trade. And yes, some Roman items have been found in India, like amphoras, a few luxury goods, but very, very little compared to the mass of export from India. And then again, there's a mass of Roman coins, hoard after hoard of Roman coins in India, especially in South India, and especially in Western Tamil Nadu, a little bit in Kerala also, which shows that the Romans were bringing coins for payment. Whereas there is little evidence of the reverse side of this picture. So again, there's a huge trade deficit, and this is what Pliny complains about. Some historians have even factored this into the decline of the Roman Empire, speculating that this depletion of the Roman treasury with its foreign trade, also with China, let's not forget China and the silk trade among other things, might have been a contributory factor to the decline of the Roman Empire. Whatever this may be, the point is that this picture continues all the way to the colonial era. And, there are those famous figures of Angus Madison, the late US economist, who tried to recreate, with whatever little data he could have, who tried to recreate the world trade, the production in GDP figures. And 2,000 years ago, it looks as if India and China together controlled 70% of the world production and trade of goods without any military component to it. It was not something fueled by warfare. It was just the regular trade across all those regions and across a very vast network overland and also across the sea. So this picture continues, and there's a dominance of this region of Asia. And but then we should not forget, and this is what I want to conclude on, that with trade, something else always travels, something that doesn't weigh a single gram, and that is ideas, culture, concepts. All kinds of rich exchanges take place, and we find this in influence of India radiating in Greece, in the Mediterranean world, and it has been traced by many scholars in many ways. Of course, Central Asia and the whole rest of Asia, and the whole Persian Gulf region also. So it's a long story of interaction, no doubt, but in my estimate, as far as I can see as objectively as possible, there is much more giving in that story than there is of receiving. India is not at all averse to receiving, And whenever something comes her way, she is happy to integrate and assimilate. And we know, of course, in the later historical period. But spontaneously, her temperament seems to be more towards a generous gift of her civilizational accomplishments. And I think that this is something perhaps our speakers of today will have much more to tell us about. Perhaps I took more time than I was supposed to. My apologies. And now I would like to invite our speakers. I believe the next is Dr. Chitra Madhavan, if I'm not mistaken. And I will now become silent and listen to all three of you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Namaste. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. Thank you very much, Vijay Lakshmi ji, for inviting me to be part of this session. And Michel ji, thank you for your kind words. And to my co-participants, a very big hello. I'm glad to meet up with both of you. So I'm going to be talking about the architecture and sculpture of Southeast Asia, the Indian Connect. Obviously, I can hardly do justice. I'll just skim the surface. I'm going to be showing on screen only two monuments. Please permit me to screen share just now. We go to Cambodia straight away. And before that, a brief introduction. We've generally heard that in ancient and medieval times, the country, Bharatavarsha, did not invade any other country. It's mostly true. If we look on Sri Lanka, then, yes, the Cholas and the Pallavas did invade that country. And in the reign of Rajendra Chola, which was in the 11th century, there was an invasion of parts of Indonesia and Malaysia when the kings of the Shailendra dynasty were there. But historians have attributed that to a little bit of provocation, and I won't go into that right now. But if we see the spread and the continuation of Indian culture over many centuries in various parts of Southeast Asia, we can attribute that to soft power. We can attribute it to trade, basically to trade. It's the traders who took across Indian culture, the culture of Bharatadesha, to various countries. Because of paucity of time, I'll go directly to Cambodia, Cambodia Desha, which was greatly influenced by the culture of India, by way of language, Sanskritam, by way of script, which I'll come to later, that is Grantha, and by way of architecture and sculpture, and by way of the entire ethos of the epics and the Puranas, the Itihasas and the Puranas. So we go to this temple, delectable little temple of sandstone, one of the oldest, 8th century, called Banteshri in Cambodia. The old name of this temple was Tribhuvana Maheshwara, the Lord of the Three Worlds. I'm just going to be showing you a few sculptures drawn from our tradition, drawn from India's hoary wealth of literature, the Puranas and the Itihasas. So this is what is called a pediment, and it was above a doorway once upon a time, but since then has not seen good days. It's on the floor now, but it's kept very safely. So what I'm trying to say here is all that idea, all the cultural wealth from here was transmitted there, but they had their own way of showing something very different. So what you have here is Narasimha killing Hiranyakashipu. Now we have sculptures dime a dozen in India and so many temples of this story. We all know it's one of the most famous stories, but look at how it's depicted here, how Narasimha is and how Hiranyakashipu is depicted and his intestines being torn out. Usually in India, when you have the sculpture, you'll see Narasimha fully seated or standing and with Hiranyakashipu on his lap, horizontal, prostrate, and being disemboweled. But this is another strange way of, very different from what we see over here. It's there in Cambodia. Here you have Indra riding on Airavata. Again, sculptures of Indra on Airavata are common in India, especially when you look at the ceiling of many of the temples of South India, in Andhra and Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, etc., where you can see Indra riding on what we call the Chaturdantam Mahagajam, 4 tusks, Mahagajam, very big elephant, and he is usually depicted as one of the Dikpalas, the 8 Dikpalas, the Ashtadikpalas, who are the guardians of the 8 different directions. However, in Cambodia, the same Indra is much made of, but he rides on this Airavata, which has 3 heads over there. So there is a small change. The Nasuma sculpture we saw was different, so is this. Now here, this is a Shiva temple, of course, and we have Shiva over here with Parvati riding on the Rishabha, the bull. Unfortunately damaged, but look at the clothes they wear. Look at the attire. It's very un-Indian. So this is how they adapted to the local tradition as well. Now, this again is another pediment. Almost all the sculptures I'm showing you are from the pediments. So you see over here, now I'm zooming in, and anyone would immediately say that this is Ravana carrying away Sita, abducting Sita. But on closer scrutiny and zooming, here you have 2 men. So this cannot be Ravana. When he was abducting Sita, he came across only Jatayu, whom he killed after a fight. So who could these 2 be? These 2 are Rama and Lakshmana. And if this is Rama and that is Lakshmana, then this cannot be Ravana. So then this is another person called Viradha, who came to the forest when Rama and Lakshmana were there and wanted to take away Sita. But Rama managed to kill him and save Sita. So this is a story, to the best of my knowledge, it's not there in any sculpture in India, but that entire Ramayana ethos has gone to Cambodia, to Cambodia Desha, and every little detail is shown over there. Now this is one of the inscriptions in Bante Sri. You have inscriptions in the script called Grantha, which was used in Tamil Nadu, especially in Tamil Nadu, for writing this language Sanskritam. Not many other places in India have used the Grantha script, but it was used in Cambodia, in Cambodia Desha. So there you have that. Beautifully etched, very precisely done. The language, the Sanskritam, is of very, very high order in these inscriptions, and they show you a lot of detail of, again, I repeat, a knowledge of the Itihasas and the Puranas combined with superb poetic skill over there. Now, this is something we really need to note. Those from Tamil Nadu may have perhaps be familiar with this, but again, perhaps not those from other parts of India. If we look at this, we know that this unfortunately very damaged sculpture is of Shiva dancing. This is Nataraja. If we look at this main figure only and we come away, we'll be losing something very, very, very important. So I'm going to the left bottom of this picture to show you this. This is a lady, emaciated old lady. There she is in this little corner. We may not, among the thousands and thousands of tourists who flock to Bante Sri temple, it's a hot destination in Cambodia. Not many will notice the sculpture, not many will be pointed this sculpture. So this is of a lady named Karekal Ammayar, who was one of the great Shiva devotees. I won't go into very great detail. She was one of the 63 great devotees of Shiva in Tamil Nadu. And this story is connected with a temple in a small place, small village called Thiruvalangadu, which is about 2 hours from Chennai. She was once a very beautiful lady, but later, turned like this. And she spent all her life in the worship of Shiva. And it is said that she went to Kailash, and Shiva told her, go to Thiruvalangadu and sing my praises there. So it is said that if you look at her hands, she has what is called the talam, or the cymbals, which musicians use for dancers. And this is how Karekal Ammayar is depicted, all skin and bone. You can even see her rib cage over there. This Karekal Ammayar tradition is a very, very Tamil, it's a Tamil Nadu tradition. And I think, to the best of my knowledge, the only other place other than Tamil Nadu which has a sculpture of Karekal Ammayar is Bante Sri in Cambodia. So here is, again, this is a musician. We can see drums like this in many of the ancient temples of South India as well. And this drummer in Cambodia very typically has features of that region. He also has a drum like this. Just one more sculpture, again an outstanding sculpture we have over here is an episode from the Mahabharata that most people know. This is the Khandavana Dahanam, the burning of the Khandava forest. So let me go to this. I'm zooming. On this side, one has Arjuna, other side is Krishna over here, again unfortunately damaged. And they set about burning this forest. These are all the animals running hither and thither. Look at how beautifully the different species of trees have been depicted over here, and even a monkey up there. And these are the snakes that are trying to escape. This is Takshaka. And right on top over here, do you see the the three-headed elephant? This is Indra sitting there on top, and he sends a shower of arrows over here and kind of creates a top for this. Every detail that is shown in this sculpture is there in the Mahabharata, and this is what we are showing over here. Completely, this is in very, very great detail. Once again, I'm not sure whether there is any temple in India that shows this particular scene from the Mahabharata. Very quickly, I'm hopping. There are ever so many temples in Cambodia with ever so many sculptures that reflect our tradition and culture in India. But since there is a time constraint, I'm not showing you any of the other temples. There are scores of them. Of course, the great Angkor Wat with Radhika ji will share with you. We are now quickly going to the island of Java in Indonesia. And here too in Indonesia, ancient Suvarnadweepa, there were many an Indian connection, mostly through trade, mostly through commerce. We know that a king named Maru Vijayatungavarman in the 11th century sent ambassadors to the court of Rajaraja Chola asking his permission to build a Buddha Vihara in this town called Nagapattinam. Because when sailors came from Indonesia, that is when the Sailendra dynasty was trading with India, when the sailors came all the way from Indonesia to the Chola country, they would land at Nagapattinam. And there they did not have a place of worship for the Buddha. So the king, Maru Vijayatungavarman, sent ambassadors to the court of Rajaraja asking his permission to build a Buddha Vihara. The magnanimous Rajaraja not only gave permission, he also endowed a village, meaning the taxes from that village, very fertile village, would go not to the king's treasury, but would go for the upkeep of the Buddha Vihara. There were so many connections between India and Indonesia in the ancient and medieval times. Now this temple that we're going to is in a place called Prambanan, beautiful temple built of volcanic rock, 8th century. Now here, this is a temple for Shiva. So as you can see, there are not an exactly good picture, but this is the central sanctum towering above the others. There's one over here for Brahma, there's one over here for Vishnu. And in front of each of them, can you see this Shikara here, one here, one here, and one here? They stand before each of the three shrines. So Shiva is enshrined not in the form of a lingam, but in the form of Shiva himself, Tatrupam, and Vishnu has a Vishnu image and the Brahma shrine has a Brahma image. Rare, because in India we don't have shrines for Brahma except in one or two places. So in front of the Brahma shrine is a smaller sanctum right in front, which used to house an image of Hamsa, his vehicle. And in front of the Vishnu shrine, obviously it was a Garuda sanctum, but the Garuda and the Hamsa are not there now. In front of the Shiva shrine is the small sanctum for Nandi, and this is how the Nandi there looks. Very, very different from what we see here in India. This is the Nandi over there. And what is even more important and of extreme interest to all of us is that in the Prakaram, as you circumambulate the sanctum, you have almost every episode from the Ramayana. I'm just showing you one. This is Ravana killing Jatayu over here. So this is the Sita Apaharanam scene. And then it just goes on and on. So many topics from the Ramayana, episodes from the Ramayana are over here. In another little sanctum, this is not one temple. It's a complex with many, many little shrines. You have a Ganesha over here. Again, never have I seen a Ganesha with his feet together like this. Hands together, we all do that, but feet together, this is very unusual. There is also a sanctum for Agastya, which I'm not showing you. Another very, very important thing about this temple is that, and I haven't brought a picture to show you, but we all know that the Natya Shastra of sage Bharata Muni, has descriptions of the 108 dance movements called the Karanas. We all know that in Rajaraja Chola's famous temple in Tanjavur, what is called the Brihadishwara temple today of the 11th century, they wanted to have carvings of all the 108 Karanas, but only 81 are completed and the remaining 27 are not. And then later we have such Karanas in the Chidambaram temple and in a few other places as well. But the most important are the Brihadishwara temple of the 11th century and the Chidambaram Karanas of the 12th century, both belonging to the Chola era, the Chola times. However, far before that, in the Prambanan temple, you have many of the Karanas. So the earliest depiction of the Karanas comes not from any temple in India, but from Indonesia, from Prambanan. And this I got to know from one of the lectures of Dr. Padma Subramaniam, the famous dancer scholar. And when I went to Prambanan, I did see some of the Karanas, though not being trained in dance, I didn't quite understand each of the Karanas. But yes, they are very much there, but at a slightly higher level. They are not at eye level, unlike in Tanjavur and in Chidambaram. So this is just a very, very superficial study of what we have in Cambodia and in Indonesia. And when we go to Vietnam, it's full of ruined temples, and more than 100 inscriptions in Sanskritam have been found over there, dating from the 4th to the 15th century CE. And they are also there. Some of them are in the Brahmi script. Sculptures of Ganesha, Vishnu, Lakshmi, Garuda, Harihara, etc. are all there. And this was Champadesha, just like that was Cambodia Desha, Cambodia was, and Indonesia was Suvarnadipa. Laos also had many a Hindu temple, ruins of which have been found. Sculptures have also been found, especially the Samudra Mantana, or the churning of the ocean of milk, was there in Laos, and very, very famous that is in Cambodia as well. What about Thailand? So close to India, many a connection, literary connection, architectural connections, cultural connections, by way of language, so many words are there, etc. And many of the Buddhist and Hindu temples bear a close similarity with those in India. Ayutthaya, the name was Ayodhya, now it's called Ayutthaya, is a place that is very sacred to the Thais, and many of the kings have been traditionally having the title Rama. So these were the Ramas of Ayodhya. I think I have well and truly crossed my time limit. This is literally a bird's eye view, not even a bird's eye view, something from far above, I think. Each of these temples deserves much more. Each of these sculptures deserves much more elaboration. It should be in detail, but this is just for people to have a random idea. I forgot to mention just one thing. We have a copper plate inscription in India from the time of Rajendra Chola, which explicitly states that the Kamboja Raja, the Raja of Cambodia in the 11th century, sent a war chariot to Rajendra in a gesture of friendship, and that is etched in a copper plate inscription. Such was the soft power of India. It went across the seas to other lands. They copied our architecture, our sculpture, our painting. So much has been taken from India, and this is standing testimony, all these lovely temples and the carvings that are there, to what India has offered to other countries. Thank you so much.
I do not know if it is for me, but to introduce the next, I suppose so. Thank you, Dr. Chitra. This was brilliant and rich despite the brevity of it, and you made it very living. Can I now invite Srimati Radhika Srinivasan to speak on the art and literary influence in Southeast Asia. So therefore, to some extent, the same region, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Michel Danino and Dr. Chitra Madhavan. Let me at the outset thank Mrs. Vijayalakshmi Vijaykumar, who has given me this wonderful opportunity to present a kaleidoscopic view of Asia, because Professor and Dr. Chitra have already given you a bird's eye view. I'm just going to add a little more in terms of how culture has spread and has seen no geopolitical divisions. It's almost like a pravaha or a flow, as one can put it. My first slide, please. Now, we have been talking about the routes, long before these two established routes of the spice route through the maritime coastal activities and the overland caravan trade routes that stretched all the way from northwest India to China on the west and to Rome. Not just that, I'm sorry, China in the east and Rome in the west. We have had cultural migrations in the prehistoric times as well. So we find a lot of pottery and rock art of Banchiang in Thailand, strikingly similar to many of the rock art traditions of India, suggesting that there were movement of people and ideas long before these established trade routes. But tradition has accorded to two individuals to have actually started a dynasty. One is Kaundinya from South India, who apparently left India and established the kingdom of Sri Shaila in Cambodia in around the 1st century AD by marrying a Princess Naga there. And the other, of course, is the princess from North who left for Korea and established, married the Suri dynasty and established the Karak tradition. But not much is known about that. But definitely the Kaundinya tradition is entrenched because we have Khmer and Tamil references to Kaundinya. Can we show the next one? This is the Brahmi script that Chitra was talking of, and it has the Grantha script, very popular in Cambodia in terms of prashastis or singing praise of the kings and so on. But this particular inscription talks of Kaundinya. Next one, please. I'm skipping because we need to give quick description of many of the things that have happened over a period of time. And 3 important Buddhist monks. We've talked of a lot of Hindu influences. We have had 3 Buddhist monks who have established several centers because India was the learning center. And we had universities like Nalanda and Udantapura and so on. So 3 monks who established this connection between Hinduism and Buddhism are very important. One is Nagarjuna, who established the Madhyamika school, which introduced a lot of Hindu devatas into Mahayana Buddhism, which spread all across the Silk Road and to the Southeast Asian tradition as well. If you see this goddess or god, its origins are very clearly in Shiva and Durga. He is known as Avalokiteshvara in Tibet. She is known as Kuan Yin in China, and he is known as Kannon. The origins are, and the names that these gods or bodhisattvas have are Pashupati, Nilochinchi is Nilakanthi, Yogeshwara, and the next slide, please. and Sarvatomukha Lokeshwara. This Lokeshwara is also the same Avalokiteshwara, but has face in all directions and represents the Sarvatomukha Lokeshwara in Angkor Thom, Cambodia. The other Buddhist monk who established Tantrayana from eastern part of India is Padmasambhava. He introduced a lot of mantras, tantras, yantras, mudras. All these are instruments of meditation and introduced mysticism to the rest of Asia. I would like to spread this discussion to not just Southeast Asia, because it's a cultural continuum which we see in all parts of China and Japan. Next one, please. This is Prakane. In Thailand, he's known as Ganesha, as we all know. He graces the entrances of every university even to this day. As Chitra said, this is a cultural flow that you can see, because not just because of the sea routes, but also because of the fact that Hinduism and Buddhism merged in many of these Southeast Asian countries, because they consider Buddha as the younger brother of Shiva, and Buddha is an incarnation of Vishnu. And therefore the three, Shiva, Vishnu and Buddha, are mutually interchangeable in many parts, including Bali. Next one, please. Here you have an Indonesian country which celebrates its cultural past by having Ganesha in its currency. Next one, please. Recently, Indonesia was trying to build a library for the Islamic State University in Yogyakarta in Indonesia, and they found a Ganesha temple totally intact. Apparently, a volcanic eruption had completely covered this temple, and while digging for laying the foundation, they found this temple totally intact. Next one, please. This is the Wat Phra Kyo temple in Bangkok, which our friend Chitra mentioned. It's a Buddhist temple. It has Jade Buddha right at the Sanctum Sanctorum, but all along its walls, you will find Ramayana panels beautifully depicting the entire tale in all its glory, because in Thailand, Ramayana is Ramakien, and Kamba Ramayanam, interestingly, as the Tamil influence was strong, had influenced the Thai Ramakien very much. Next one, please. This is the mural that I was talking of. There are more than 400 murals all along the walls. Here, Chonak, or King Janaka, is discovering Sita, Nong Sida, by plowing the earth. Next one, please. Here we find King Erlanga of East Java, represented as Mahavishnu riding the Garuda. This clearly indicates how the Deva Raja concept, or the God King concept, that pervaded sometime between the Gupta era and the Cholas, where we had Govinda Raja, Sundara Raja, Raja Rajeshwara, all of them visualizing themselves as representatives of gods on earth, going to Cambodia and establishing the same principle. In fact, the Thai king, King Rama X today, is considered to be an avatara or an incarnation of Vishnu. Next one, please. It's not just the past that we are talking of. Even in modern Indonesia, the Islamic country does not have any problem with its culture and has recreated this Mahabharata right at the center of the business district, where Krishna is giving the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, and the horses, the dynamic horses, are ready to take on the war. Next one, please. This is Hanuman, or Hanuman, as we know. it graces the Indonesian city center. Interestingly, this Hanuman is not the depiction of what we find in ordinary Valmiki Ramayana and Kamba Ramayana. Hanuman Nataka, a 7th century work by Bhavabhuti, influenced the Indonesian and Thai versions so much that even today, they recreate this larger than life Hanuman who can expand in size and gobble up the sun, or go down to the sea and turn into a fly and enter into a demon's stomach. So very interesting. In Thailand, for instance, he's also pretty profligate, is interested in women. And so Hanuman takes on different characteristics in these Ramayanas. And the Indonesians wear a talisman with Hanuman even to this day. Next one. This is the Sun Wukong, the monkey god in China. And as you know, Chinese influence, the Buddhism influenced China a lot more than Hindu gods and goddesses. So you have a Buddhist version of the same Hanuman, but he helps Yuanchang, the Bodhisattva, to procure the Tripitaka from West, that is India. And so he too has the same magical powers, mystical powers, and he in fact has occult powers too. Next one, please. This is the grand Angkor Wat that Dr. Chitra was mentioning. It graces the Cambodian Siem Reap province. It's a total recreation of the Yuga or eons, where you have the Kali Yuga right at the entrance. Then you go to Dwapara Yuga, then the Treta Yuga, and finally at the center you have the Satya Yuga. Now, why do I say this? Because this is a perfect mandala, which is, I'll discuss this mandala later, which creates space on earth and then shows you how the three worlds, the past, present, and future, can be integrated in the here and now. Next one, please. This is Indraloka that they have created, where these apsaras, they are light as a feather. They are the intermediaries between heaven and earth who grace the walls in the Indraloka. Next one. These are the modern dancers, apsaras, who are creating the Indraloka for modern audiences. Next one. In the same temple of Angkor Wat, we have this grand celebration of the creation when churning of the ocean takes place. Here we know the story about how the Devas are on one side and the Asuras, the good kings and the evil on the other side. This carving creates Ravana on one side and Hanuman on the other, and they are churning the ocean of creation and getting Amrita Manthana, which means getting nectar of immortality from the earth. Next one, please. This is Mahavishnu appearing at the center. The Vasuki is the snake, and the tortoise that represents stability is where he is dancing on, and the Devas and are all very happy, and they are showering flowers from above. Next one. Now we saw how Angkor Wat was a mandala. What is a mandala? A mandala is a concept, a diagrammatic representation of the object of worship. Sometimes it can take a ritual mandala, sometimes a performing arts mandala, sometimes architectural mandala. A mandala or a yantra is just a means to procure the object that you are seeking. Three things are required for a mandala: the square space, the circular time, and the sacred center space, where time and space collapse into eternity in the here and now, depicted as the Mahameru in the Sri Yantra, which is worshipped by the Hindus today. Next one, please. In fact, our dancer, Rukmini, danced in front of a Sri Yantra to suggest how the object of worship merges with her as she moves to the temple. But before that, the Kali kills the ego of the aesthete or devotee, and then she moves to the higher levels of awareness. This is the architectural mandala that I was talking about. It's in Borobudur, built by the Sri Shailas in 9th century. Sri Vijaya, I'm sorry. Now, this is a typical Buddhist stupa where the 4 gates are our own apertures actually, where if we close in and enter these gates, close all the senses and enter the gates, then you find in the first 4 square platforms, you have the early lives of Buddha, where through metta, which is friendship, karuna, which is compassion, mudita, which is pleasant temperament, and upekha, which is equanimity. Through those processes of inner purification, the devotee merges with the object that he is looking for, which is the divine. Now, as you move along these, you'll have tails carved in the squares all around. And then when you move to the circular terraces, you find the images of the Buddha, just a glimpse of it. Actually, he is Samanta Buddha, Samanta Bhadra. The story is Prince Sudhana is going after the ultimate truth and enlightenment, which is Bodhicitta. So he moves up towards the ladder through these gunas or qualities. And as he goes on purifying himself and does a lot of dana, which is what is described in the circular terraces, he merges with the object of his worship, which is Samantabhadra Bodhisattva. Next one, please. This is the semi-seated posture which the dancers, classical Indian dancers, take on before they start. And through time movements in circle, they create the mandala and awaken their own creative energies. Next one. It is this stance, this is the path of the devotee right from the beginning. And as he moves along the squares, he creates processes where he is controlling his senses, and then sama, dhamma, uparama, titiksha, shraddha, samadhana, all these qualities that we emulate are all inscribed, whether it is Buddhism or Hinduism, all these processes are the same. Next one, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back? Here, why are these squares in shivered state? One might wonder. In fact, the shivered state or the jagged edges are typical of all temples as well. The idea was to create movement in a frozen thing called stone. And how do you create movement? Because even the center is in motion, as we know. So the master sculptors created this squares, one square superimposed on the other, which then creates the movement-like feeling, so that the inner God is actually inhaling and exhaling. Next one. Here you have Indonesian dancers taking on the same mandala sthana like the mandala sthana of Kerala, because Kerala clearly had a deep impact on Indonesia. In fact, in Bali, you have a tribe called Malayali. Clearly, they are Malayalis. And Orang Kling means Orang Kalinga, from people who went all the way from Orissa, established, and they are called Orang Kling in Malay. But of course, today that term is not considered a very good term. Next one, please. We were talking about the literary and linguistic traditions that have enveloped this cultural continuity. Without feeling superior or exclusive, we need to see how we shared our ideas and values. Here you find not only are the Southeast Asian scripts heavily influenced by the Devanagari and the Brahmi and Tamil scripts, but even the words you will find are loan words. Some of them I have captured here. Earth is Bhumi, Bhumi in Sinhalese, Bhumi in Malay and Indonesian, and Phum, because Bha becomes Pa in Thai. Next one, please. Not only words, not only stories of Panchatantra, Kathasarit Sagara, Jathakas, and Harivamsa, all the epics, as you know, have moved all along, including China and Japan. We also have interesting proverbs evolved out of these literary works, and some of these proverbs that I have culled from such day-to-day usage are right before you. Digging a well after fire is very Indian. Nahi Kupa Khananam Pradipte Vanine Grihe is the Sanskrit proverb. Giniganne Mohatte Lin Khaninavage is Sinhalese, and you know, Wa Hai Lom Korp is Thai, and Kaji Ato no Pompu is Japanese. Now, we just
Sorry to intervene. Namaskar, sorry to intervene.
I'm running out of time. Yeah,
yes.
sure. I just wanted to conclude by saying that we've touched just the surface of this huge cultural flow that has swept this Asian continent, and we must learn to rewrite our history in the light of what we have understood and realized. Thank you very much, Vijayalakshmi ji, for having given me this opportunity. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Radhika ji. It was so rich, and we can understand that it could go on and on and on. There is no end to this expansion of India's soft power, as you say. I would now request Dr. Lavanya ji to make her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michel Danino, my chair. I'm thrilled to be here. And thank you very much to Indica and in particular, Vijayalakshmi ji. And I also thank my fellow panelists, Radhika ji and Chitra ji. Lot of information has been brought forward. Michel Danino began with Western connections, speaking about Indus Valley and early Mesopotamian connections, and then going back to Greek and Roman connections. And then the connections were taken on towards the east by my fellow panelists, examining Indonesia, Cambodia, and so Chitra and Radhika ji have already examined it. I will be bringing all of this together. The title of my lecture actually sums up what I am about to discuss in this talk. Three very important words: India, influence, and antiquity. Let me discuss these words first before we log into the subject. I won't take a long time. I'll be finishing up very fast, but let me give you the basics so we can jump into the topic. The first word is India. So what is India? We are discussing in this subject, right? We are discussing actually antiquity. So the India that we are discussing is much larger in geographical extent than modern India. Archaeological and ancient evidence is noticed in the steppes up to Turkmenistan. And in the east also. So some may say these regions are different countries now, and all that. But the ancient culture still continues in India. So cultural continuity and civilizational connection still exists in India. So even though these countries have become different countries now, they shared a common past before modernity began. So the Indian civilizational extent that we are discussing is much larger than what we see in India today. And the second word is influence. What is influence? How can we assess influence and civilizational connections between different nations spanned across large geographical regions? Indian connection, Indian influence, of course, we can see in tangible and intangible sources. Intangible sources, you know, the arts, languages, Chitraji, Madhavanji has showed, and tangible sources, the archaeological evidence, Michel Danino has discussed. So both tangible and intangible sources give us information on the influence. And to actually know them in solid terms, we can look at three things. The first thing we need to look at when assessing the influence is state-to-state relations. And the second thing we assess is commerce and communications. And the third thing we have to assess is people-to-people relations. All these three relations existed from all the periods that we discussed. For the most ancient period that we discussed, Michel Danino has showed state-to-state relations as well as commerce and communications and people-to-people relations. People-to-people relations in the sense of movements, migrations, marriages, noticed across the spectrum, across the time period that we are discussing. So antiquity is the third word. How far back does this go? How far back we can date these? I really think the relations of India with the rest of the world, rest of the non-African world, could be dated to the beginning because as I discussed in my last lecture, DNA, genetic heritage of India shows that the older male and older female genetic heritage of the non-African population, the founder genetic heritage, is actually traced in India. So the connections, of course, are there in the genetics. But historically, though, we can actually trace it from Vedic and Indus civilization. So, for example, if we are looking at Indus civilization is dated from 12,000 years ago, Mehergar that Michel Danino has discussed, all the way to 900 CE. So we have Harappan seals, Harappan pottery, Harappan kind of, you know, the Indus Valley images, Indus Valley related artifacts are found across India, northwestern India, as well as Central Asia, and Persian Gulf, as well as all the way up to Turkmenistan. Srinivasan has excavated what he talks as Indus Valley related material and also Vedic related material, which shows Vedic yajnas and things like that. So, of course, archaeological sources are there. Archaeological seals, images, all these are there in the West. For dates between 5000 CE up to Greek and Roman connections. What kind of connections exist in intangible sources, right? Intangible sources, we have language connections. You can see Sanskrit, influence of Sanskrit across the West Asia, as we know, and Central Asia, replaced, of course. towards Europe. So, so tangible, intangible connections from the early beginnings. One of the recent discoveries that comes from Harappan Indus Valley sites adds more evidence to what already exists. So the Indus Valley site, Rakhigarhi, gave this skeleton, right? The skeleton was examined and a paper was published in the Cell. The paper actually notes Rakhigarhi belongs to U2B2. U2B2 is a 15,000 years ago genome that actually originated in India, which is also found in India across wide spectrum, not in caste, not in tribe, but across the spectrum. And the important thing is this Harappan skeleton carries typical Indian genome, and also it connects with 11 other skeletons spread all the way in Persian Gulf, West Asia, Central Asia, as well as up to Turkmenistan. So, so 11 skeletons. So we have the evidence that the people-to-people connection also existed. Not only that the state-to-state connection existed, which we know from Mitanni and the inscriptions of Sargon and all that. And we also note the trade connection existed because of seals and all that, trade and communications. And we also know the people-to-people connection and migrations also existed because many of these people with Indian specific genome were actually living in many places across these regions. So there is a close cultural contact. And I really think that proves also the antiquity of Indian influence in the West. And of course, in the East, we already know people migrated as well as with them, the culture, languages, and everything migrated. The contacts, prehistoric, pre-modern contacts before 100 CE are difficult to track. Very few of them remain. But on the eastern side, the contacts are much more easier to track, the tangible connections as well as intangible connections. So the Indian influence existed in the antiquity for a long time. And I would conclude my my lecture that India should strive for developing similar cultural contacts and similar contacts and relations with the neighbors on all sides from now. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lavanya ji. It was a very good, overarching discussion of the concepts and the mechanisms at work in all these all this phenomenon of cultural interaction in the end. So thank you so much. I think Vijayalakshmi ji, if you are there, I think we are running a little late, but can we still take a few questions? Shall we, or do you have Vijayalakshmi ji?
Yes, certainly we can take a few questions.
Yes. All right. Should I can see them in the question and answer box.
Yes,
can
please.
I just select quickly a few?
Yes, go ahead.
Or I will skip perhaps some minor ones with apologies to the questioners. Maybe they can be sent later to the scholars. One question for Dr. Chitra. I did realize that the Brihadishwar temple sculptures, that refers to the Karanas, of course, were incomplete. Any reasons? If we can try brief answers if possible. Dr. Chitra?
Yes, thank you. They are incomplete. Of the 108, only 81 have been completed. The space for the remaining is there still, but they were not completed. The reason for that, I'm afraid, we will never ever know. It's a mystery, and history is a mystery. So why did it not get completed in the reign of Rajaraja Chola was perhaps because the temple itself was not 100% completed in his own reign. And much of what we see today was done in the reign of Rajendra. But why did Rajendra not take the effort to complete the Karana sculptures with the aid of his sculptors? We don't know. He shifted his capital, but Tanjavur was a pivot nevertheless. And the Nayak rulers who came later did all kinds of things, good things, bad things, but they didn't complete the Karanas. The Marathas who came later didn't complete the Karanas. The Pandyas who came after the Cholas, before the Nayaks, also didn't complete the Karanas. We won't know.
Thank you. Beautiful answer. There is a question from Dr. Kalyana Raman. Dr. Kalyanji, I will sum it up if you permit, which is how to ensure that the implementation of the new national education policy, as it is called, at all levels incorporate these stunning evidences of fusion of Bharatiya culture into the ancient Far East. Well, I can perhaps attempt a very brief answer. If you read the document which has been released recently, actually there is a surprisingly fair place given to what we may loosely call Indian culture, Indian heritage, Indian concepts, thought, and even the phrase Indian knowledge systems is used. So as always, Dr. Kalyanji, everything will depend on implementation. At least some right steps have been formulated in the sense of the, the vision for education. Now we have to see what is done in practice. That's, I think, the best we can say in a brief time. Then Mr. Ramakrishnan Sitaraman asks, have these South Asian connections, and maybe Radhika ji might want to take this up, actually translated into real advantages for India and Southeast Asian countries as a bloc, vis-a-vis the rest of the world in the recent past? All these seem to be an account of ancient connections that may not really make any difference in the world of contemporary international politics. Of course, the people of these countries relate readily to one another, which is fine. I think you have understood the drift of the question. Would you like to try briefly, Radhika ji? You will, thank you.
I have always believed that geopolitical considerations always shrink our understanding of the past. And so unless we can free ourselves from these borders, the artificial borders that we create, we cannot understand the movement of ideas, culture, spirituality across Asia. So in modern context, we are getting narrower and narrower. In fact, Kumaraswamy, the Sri Lankan scholar, said, as we go farther and farther into the past, we find greater and greater connectivity. And as we grow closer and closer to the modern times, we find narrow spirit.
Thank you. That's, again, beautifully put. Thank you very much. Triveen Nair is asking a very pointed question in case anybody can answer. I'm not sure who. I wanted to know more detail on the Indonesian tribe connected to Kerala. Just the name of the tribe and the location would suffice. I can research the rest. Do we have the name of that tribe?
Radhika ji spoke about it.
Yes, yes, yes. Radhika ji? You have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Yes, yes, thank you.
It's called Melayala, and they still live in Bali.
Melayala.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you. Then Anjan Nandi has a question, perhaps for Dr. Chitra, I'm not sure. Architectural built form are standing cultural examples of heritage of all-inclusive in related countries with same spiritual practices. So how can we incorporate these heritages in this topic? I cannot say that I understand very much, but Dr. Chitra, if you would like to try.
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
So we will skip it. We will skip it. Ramakrishnan Sitaraman has a question for Dr. Lavanya, and maybe I will attempt a brief commentary on this later. Rakhigarhi was a single individual, cannot be used to discern overall migration trends one way or another. That's all the genetics we have from India. In contrast, to compare to over 500 across Europe and Asia outside India, and then there is a website given as reference. Dr. Lavanya?
I would like to show that, but I don't have it here. But the 500 skeletons are actually spread across the world. There are only, I think, 35 or 40 spread across Central Asia to India. And 11 skeletons out of this 50 or 60 is a large number for any one group. And you would agree. Yes. For Rakhigarhi, of course, Rakhigarhi is an ancient skeleton. But as you know, and you have also researched this, DNA evidence can be traced from living individuals. From living individuals, of course, the earliest female as well as the earliest male genome was tracked to India, and the female genome, of course, traces to 74,000 years ago. And then male genome, of course, 70,000 years ago. And of course, from the female M, and the Rakhigarhi genome is a female genome. It is a recent genome. The original genome, M is from 70,000 years ago, and R is from 50,000 years ago, and N is from even before, kind of like before 50. So from R, W originated about 20 to 16,000 years ago. That's where our U2B2 comes. U2B2 is the subclade of this W that came from R. So it is typically an Indian skeleton showing Indian genome that actually originated and connected to this first founders genome that actually came to India. The founders came to India about 80,000 years ago, maybe 200,000 years ago. But we have no evidence. We have the evidence that we can track only to 80,000 years ago. So 11 skeletons across Central Asia, West Asia is a lot. It's a large specimen, large group out of the 40 or 50 that are located in this region. And it is typical Indian genome. So it's clear, you know, there is, of course, Western groups that are trying to argue, you know, the migration happened from West to East and into South Asia. But if that is the case, the oldest should be shown, you know, the oldest genome should appear somewhere in Central Asia or West Asia or wherever they're trying to put the homeland. Why is the oldest genome actually in India? Why all of the rest of them have actually originated in India? And the next question is, why so many genome specific to India are found across the region? If the migration happened this way, you know, more should be found, you know, going this way, right? Not that way. So,
yeah, good.
So it is self-explanatory, and I will, you know, hope you add some more to it.
Well, I think we will not go too deep into this topic because it's actually, I wrote a paper in Journal of Biosciences in India where I critiqued the methodology. I just want to say that archaeogenetics is a very, very young science, very young. It's a new science. They have to clean up their methodologies quite a bit. And a lot of assumptions are built on scanty evidence sometimes. For example, this one skeleton of Rakhigarhi is not even sure to be of a local person, because in nearby Farmana, stable isotope analysis of the enamel of the teeth of the skeletons proved that they were not locals. And it looks as if the Harappans tended to bury the non-locals and cremate the locals. Possibly, this is a reasonable assumption without certainty, of course. So in any case, we are not even sure who exactly we are talking about. And I may very slightly disagree when you say that these groups are spread across a wide, you know, like 500. For example, in Europe, when they did a complete study of Neolithic populations, yes, you're right, the genomes were widespread, but nevertheless for Europe alone, they collected some 400 different DNA samples, different genomes. And then they could start drawing wide, broad conclusions out of 400 distinct genomes. And we are erecting a lot on just one. So it's simply to say that all this discussion is very valid, but it is going, you know, more data will obviously alter the landscape, and we don't know exactly in what ways. So if I may move on, whether we will say whether India is the most ancient civilization, well, that's extremely easy to answer. If you permit, I will attempt. Archaeologists call civilizations the development of urbanism with the state, with an administration, with a bureaucracy, with internal, external trade. That's normally the definition, and agricultural surplus and so on. If prior to that, for example, Neolithic cultures are not regarded, strictly speaking, as civilizations. In that sense, in that limited specific sense, you can of course give a different definition. Then the Sumerian Mesopotamian civilization is the oldest, because the cities began 1,000 years before the Harappan cities. And the next is the ancient Egyptian, about 3000 BC also, roughly. And then comes the Harappan civilization. So if you want really to rank in terms of antiquity, which I don't consider is very important, but if you insist, Mr. Vinod Kumar is asking, then we are the third. That's what it boils down to. And there's a question, what do you mean by Kaundinya tradition? Isn't that addressed to Radhika ji? Radhika ji, what is meant by Kaundinya tradition? You have to unmute your mic.
Yes.
There is a question on the Kaundinya tradition. If you can very briefly.
I said tradition ascribes to Kaundinya. It's different from Kaundinya tradition.
Yes, certainly.
Tradition means we do not have enough historical evidence except one epigraphical evidence that suggests that Kaundinya established the kingdom of Sri Shaila in Cambodia.
Very well, thank you. I'm going to skip the next question on Aryan Dravidian theory, otherwise we are still here tomorrow morning. And Vijay Lakshmiji is going to scold all of us. And I will go to the next, to me, about teakwood as best suited for seawater. And teak is a very South Indian plant. So yes, if I remember well from couple of papers, I would have to dig them up. The parts of the Roman Navy were constructed with teakwood from South India. And because they found that it had much better property to resist the salinity of the sea. So this is as far as I remember. I cannot give you a ready immediate reference, but I think it would be easy to locate it. And Dr. Chitra, somebody is asking for the title of your book on South Indian heritage, and the publisher, would you please briefly mention it and unmute yourself?
I have two books, History and Culture of Tamil Nadu, volumes 1 and 2. Are those the ones he's referring to?
There is the co-edited volume, you know, on South Indian. I think that is the one.
It's called, I've forgotten the name now. What's that book called?
Was it not East West published?
Published by East West. It's called South India Heritage. I was the co-editor. It has 500 articles on various aspects of South India.
Very well, very well. I'm skipping a few minor things. Can we refer to the region as India in ancient times? I think Dr. Lavanya has partly answered. You know, it's a question of terminology. As long as you agree on what the words mean, it doesn't really matter. But usually ancient historians refer to, when they say India, they mean the Indian subcontinent, broadly, or South Asia, if you prefer, in modern parlance. That's something we can all agree upon, and it makes things very simple. And I'm sorry, we would skip the question on the Aryan Dravidian theory. I insist on skipping it because it's too complex. and we cannot do any justice to it in a few minutes. We were supposed to close the session at 8:15, and then I'm handing over to Vijayalakshmiji for a few last words, and I hope she is satisfied with this first session in this Namaste 2020. My warm thanks to our brilliant speakers. We covered a lot of ground in a short time. Vijayalakshmiji, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Professor. This is Aparna Sridhar here. I'll just take a few minutes. Thank you, Professor Michel, Danino, Dr. Chitra, Madhavan, Dr. Lavanya, and Srimati Radhika Srinivasan for a very engaging session. And this session probably sums up why we chose to name this Utsava Namaste. As we know, Nama is from the Rig Veda, and it also appears in the later Vedic texts. So the beauty of our civilization and its values is that it's an unbroken heritage that we inherit and continue to live today. The word itself probably also reflects Nama would be to give up our possessions, and can also be described as Tyaga, which perhaps is the thread which connects all of our knowledge systems, our practices, our rituals, our spiritual paths that integrate yoga, Ayurveda, is one of abandoning all to the divine, including our souls. So that was the basis of selecting Namaste. Of course, it's got coined during COVID due to its as a form of greeting. And from antiquity, we would also like to stress on the modernity and the continuing relevance of everything that was spoken about by our esteemed panelists. And on this note, I'll also just mention some of the sessions that we can look forward to tomorrow. We have labs which happen in the morning. These are interactive workshops related to yoga, Ayurveda, and Sahitya. Tomorrow we have food, body and mind, as well as diet and dosha. And in the evening session, we have the global significance of Ayurveda, where we will be joined by the ambassador of India to Canada. And we also have a dynamic diaspora. So looking forward to having all of you again with us tomorrow. And we thank all of you who've joined us in this session today. And we seek your blessings and your wishes for the entire month to come. Thank you so much. Namaste.
We will all end with a small prayer, and I would like all of you to join us with this. And Michel, how can I ever not be satisfied with what all of you do? I mean, we are very thankful and honored that all of you were there with us, and we look forward to your continuing this journey with us. I'm sure the participants would like, a whole day seminar from all of you. We'll do it probably sometime late next month. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Shubharatri to one and all.